Okay, we are back to talk about The Curse, which aired November 2023 to January 2024 on Showtime. As Karen mentioned, written and created by Nathan Fielder and Benny Safdie. Just a quick recap of the entire season. Whitney and Asher Siegel are an entrepreneurial, eco-conscious couple trying to bring their vision of new forms of green housing to the town of Espanola, New Mexico, and at the same time to the screen on HGTV. Their friend Dougie is a producer of this proposed show, tries to use their work and the messiness of their marriage to make something that HGTV viewers will want to see. Along the way, a young girl curses Asher for not giving her a few dollars, which causes him, his marriage, the show, and the vision of what they want to do to begin to spiral downwards in some very interesting ways. Sometimes this is from actual circumstances. Sometimes maybe just it's all in Asher's mind and it's in his behavior and his psychology. In the future, at the end of the season, after Whitney gets pregnant and her relationship with Asher improves, the show Green Queen is renewed for a second season. Asher gives a renter, Abshir, who was the father of the girl who cursed him, the deed to a property outright. And the show ends with Asher beginning to strangely float as gravity seemingly is reversed on him. He's seeking help from family and friends, but his wife goes into labor. Dougie sees a great moment for TV. The fire department tries to help him, and Asher is shot into space at the same time Whitney gives birth to their new baby boy. If you've not seen this and you're hearing that and it sounds a little out there, then you're not alone.
If you're listening for some reason and you listened to all of that and you thought, "What? This show sounds weird. What?" Let me assure you, it's stranger than it sounds.
Yeah.
It's overall that is
Yes, I would
Ryan
say
just gave
that
a
that
pretty
was the
straightforward summary, and the show's
that was the
actually kind of weirder.
that was the conservative recap of the show. I think there's much more that we'll try to dig into here. So where do you want to start?
Lots of stuff. I don't know. I mean, they talk about the show overall. Maybe I want to start with, I wrote on this show as it aired and I put out the weekly recaps. And one of the things I kept feeling like I didn't find enough space for, and maybe it also has to do with my own limitations to express my thoughts about, is the visual style, the way it's directed, and the music, just like the feel of the show, because it's very distinctive. And it's one of those things that makes me wish that I had a bit more of a toolkit in terms of talking about cinematography and things like that.
Yes, that's a great point because this show, throughout its 10 episodes, was had so much that was discussed in terms of plot, in terms of what's next, in terms of the uniqueness and strangeness of it, that some of the technical aspects of the show, I think, were lost on how how great it was, right? Sort of a show about a show being made, first of all, and then
Mm-hmm.
just the way that it was shot, some of the unique music, some of the unique ways of focusing on this, not only the architecture but the background and the aesthetic that they were in New Mexico. They did a fantastic job, and some of that was lost just because it was of the conversation of what was happening within the show.
There's just too much to talk about, right? And at least that's what
Yeah.
I found when I was writing my recaps. I didn't where do I fit in the thoughts about this sort of thing? And then also, how do I express them? Again, I don't know that I always feel like I have the language, but I know they did certain things, like some of the shots are from very far away. You think about, like, why is it that the curse doesn't look or feel like anything else on TV? And that's part of it. They're breaking the normal rules in terms of where they've set up the camera, the kinds of shots that they're using. There's a kind of dirtiness to it, and I don't know, I should have rewatched. There was a YouTube video that I watched where this guy was talking about all of the stuff in a much better way than I'm equipped to do. Maybe I could find it. Put link to that video in our YouTube description or whatever, or on the podcast summary put up on the website, that sort of thing, because it was really interesting and I thought he did a really good job. But then they switch it when they go to the HGTV show, and those
Yeah.
segments they actually change the aspect ratio. It looks just like something on HGTV, and I think it really makes it stand out how the rest of the show doesn't. And on the one hand, it feels kind of very realistic, but on the other hand, it's breaking the rules of what would be quote unquote realism in film. It was very interesting
Yeah,
how
and
they did
I
it.
think that when you compare it to some of those things where they show real HGTV, or HGTV quality footage within this program, you almost feel like the rest of it, there's a little something off, or a little something needs to be tweaked, or something that just feels like we need some adjustment here. And I think there was sort of a point there that they were trying to make with this sort of the message of what they were trying to deliver with the show. That yeah, there's something a little bit there's something not quite right with this whole thing, right? Their show, their marriage, their life, and it's reflecting the fact that the way that this is shot looks like there needs to be some things fixed compared to what we normally see on a station like
Mhm.
HGTV. There was also the idea that many of these shots, I think, or I saw described as sort of voyeuristic, right? You're looking at them through a
Yeah.
window, through a door, and it was that meant to reflect sort of how Dougie was kind of taking advantage of looking at their life and making a show sort of created on the problems that they had and some of the things that he saw. So just the combination of those things, and just outside of plot, was just fascinating to see. Like you said, it's things not seen before.
Yeah. And the music's quite good. Also, is like the sound design.
Hmm.
One thing I kept thinking about as I watched it at various points is how the show creates a sense of unease in various moments, and it's actually doing it through that, you know, in terms of what's going on in the plot in a specific moment. Maybe there isn't really anything there, but the way that they frame Nathan Fielder's face and the way that a certain, kind of ominous music comes in, you go, oh, it's kind of is making me uncomfortable. Um, and I think that was one of the things that I really did enjoy about the show, as perverse as this sounds, throughout, as it sort of makes you very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it challenges us, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of this show that I would say challenges us. Some of that might, get into some of the socio-political things that it talks about. There's plenty of that in terms of gentrification, white privilege, indigenous rights, a lot of different things that this show tries to tackle. Any of those things stand out for you directly?
Yeah, I mean, we should talk about it. I don't know that there's a message, as it were, what is going on, with the Seagulls, right? Asher and Whitney. They've got these oh, I should have made a note of what they call them because I'm blanking now. I guess I thought I would just remember. The homes. This is a real
Yeah,
thing. Passive homes. Passive homes.
passive homes. Yep,
It's a
yep.
real thing, right? Um, so being who I am, I look at that and go, well, yeah, that seems like, that's a good idea, eco-friendly, sustainability, all that kind of thing, right? Um, but they are also purposefully attempting to gentrify Espanol. I mean, they basically say as much.
Yeah.
What do we think about that? They have this line about, though, oh, but we're not going to displace the residents. We're going to subsidize their ability to live in these new passive homes.
And placate them by giving them these temporary jobs at these, places that we're helping build up, or because of the gentrification. Yeah.
But it seems like that is temporary, and they never explicitly spell it out. They come pretty close at one point. It seems like, okay, but the long term plan is that kind of thoroughgoing, gentrification, which I know using that term immediately brings negative connotations to a lot of people, um, which is fair. But at the same time, there is an implication of it's like, well, you're like actually making things better in certain ways, Um, but the displacing of the population that was already there is often the big thing, the big kind of negative, right,
Yeah.
to gentrification. And so, how serious are they about not doing that? I think it slips out at certain moments that in the long run, not so much. In the long run, the idea is to totally kind of revamp this town and raise all the property values, right? The big profits come kind of down the line in terms of the real estate aspect of this. And the HGTV show is like a part of that business plan on the PR side. And I don't know, there's just a lot of ways in which with the whole setup, I was never quite sure how to feel about it because
Yeah.
it wasn't straightforward. I don't know. What about you?
because it always seemed to try to partner what they were doing with these um very they wanted to almost portray them as very altruistic, doing the right thing. These passive homes have net zero or net negative energy. Always saying that, okay, the things that they're trying to do are have good intentions and perhaps even good outcomes, but the method by which that they pursue them, then it gets ugly if you look underneath it a little bit.
Well, and it's
And no, no, just
sorry.
saying,
Finish your thought.
and that um, just that there was never a this was never sort of a black and white. I'm not talking about original. There's never a black and white, right and wrong thing here. This was you can't have a good outcome. At least in my mind, it's one of the points of the show is you can't have a good outcome and positive thing happen without some turmoil happening underneath it, or maybe pushed away from it, and you're trying to get away from it, and it's always going to be there.
Yeah, and I mean the way that I never quite figured out how to put this, but Asher and Whitney they're out of touch in some way. They don't get it
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
meaningful way. I don't know exactly how he pinned that down with a term or something, but think about, for example, so they have got the jeans shop, right? And there's a shoplifting problem,
Hmm.
right? And the guy, whose name I should have made more notes of people's names. Anyway, the one guy that's there at the beginning who's from Espanola,
Hmm.
he showed up with a gun, like he wants to keep people from shoplifting. And Whitley's like, no, you can't do that. It's like a victimless crime. And this is an example to me of something where part of me is like very much in sympathy with the position she's taking. Like part of me wants to say, she's right, she
Yeah,
shouldn't be um approaching shoplifting with violence, and the motivation to keep the police out of it, and you don't want to ruin someone's life because they shoplifted or whatever. But these people aren't shoplifting groceries, they're shoplifting designer jeans.
yeah,
If that's one thing. And then the other thing is she ends up just saying like to the working at the store, oh well, just like bring it up on my credit card
yeah.
whenever anyone steals something. And word gets out, and there's like the way that spirals out where it's like almost like I want to say she has good intentions or at a certain theoretical level is kind of right, but then in practice it's a disaster.
Yeah, yeah. There will always this show seemed to always have this sense of setting up Whitney and Asher as we know best, and that we was always defined in several different ways. Like we could have been us as the white people coming into this town, we as in rich, privileged people, we as in our causes, our methods, the things that we think should be done here. And just the danger of, and maybe even the curse of coming into a place, coming in anywhere and saying, my way is right. What we should do is the path that you all should take, without taking into account anything in terms of history, the area, its population. We'll talk about, some of the indigenous culture things here shortly, but taking none of that into account, just saying, we have an idea, we know best, we need to pursue it, sort of outcomes be damned in terms of what happens.
Yeah, except that they also seem weirdly self-conscious about that, like they're trying to avoid that, but they're delusional is the thing. You get this
Yeah.
structure where they're just kind of detached from reality and suffering from their own delusions. And how do you even parse the truth there, right? Like, are Asher and Whitney respecting the kind of indigenous culture of Espanola? From the outside, I kind of want to say no when it comes
Yeah.
down to it. They want to say yes. They're aware of the issue, right? They're aware of worries about cultural appropriation. They're aware of worries about gentrification. They're aware of the background history of colonialism and all that. They've got this hyper awareness of all of that, and yet they're like, um, I don't know. They're almost like just at a theoretical level with it and unable to see how that actually works out in a more concrete way. I don't know. So it's like I
Yeah.
but I think that they believe their own bullshit. And that's
Yeah.
part of what makes the show so compelling.
That is a great bottom line, right? And even to go back to your words, theoretically, they believe all these things that they come in with the knowledge, the history, the understanding of. We're going to pay attention to all of this. We're going to keep all this in mind. Then doing that, it is solved or approached or decided in a way that they still think is best, not as what's incorporating, what actually needs to be done within the community, within the population, within the people that they're affecting. It is their theoreticalness of approaching these problems in a way that they think that they should be solved.
Yeah. And so let's talk about what I put in the notes is all the stuff with Cara Durand.
Yeah,
Because I thought this was a really great part of the show. The actress name here, I'm almost certain to mangle her name, but I want to mention her name. Miss Hania Austin plays Cara Durand, the indigenous artist. Hopefully, people remember from the show. This is where Whitney goes to her art installation and eats
mhm.
the turkey, and Cara yells at her for eating the turkey. And um, I want to look at a couple things that I've read along the way here. One of them was about that actually, when Kara ultimately like explains that bit with the turkey, like what is the meaning of this art installation?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, from what I've read, I guess that was what she says is basically in line with what Benny Safdie and Nathan Fielder had in mind. But in this interview I read or watched of them a while ago, I don't remember which, they basically said, well, no, that this was Miss Hania Austin. She put it precisely this way, and it was like she put it better than we could have articulated. And
yeah,
that something really did stem from her in terms of all of that and what's going on with this character. And I think she does really represent in a personalized way the relationship between um, Whitney in particular and kind of the indigenous culture.
yeah.
And
You know, this I may be completely off base here, and this just came to me. It seems like Kara, there are other the guy you were talking about that was given the security job and decides, well, the right thing to do because of the area we live in is to bring the shotgun to the stores. Nobody shoplifts. Um,
mm-hmm.
it's funny. Maybe it's just because they did such a good job with the setting and sort of this aesthetic that we talked about. It almost seems like Whitney and Asher and Dougie, those people are acting in a story. Everybody else is just sort of being very authentic in terms of to what this place in New Mexico actually is, what their story, what their history is there. And it's just like this alien force just descended on it. And Whitney and Asher Dougie just don't belong. I don't know. I just was compelled by the stuff with Cara Duran, with the other natives of that city, because it was so interesting to me. It was so foreign to me and unique to me. And it seems like you guys should not be here. You don't at all belong in this area because it's so rich in some of these other things. I don't know. It just seems like, and maybe that was the point that they just felt like, I mean, real aliens coming and landing and somewhere that they don't belong. This area need them there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's something to that, in the parallel with, I don't know, the history of colonialism, the history of the United States,
Yeah.
and I don't have a worked out line on that. I'm not sure the show does either. That's part of what I find so interesting about it. It's like kind of playing with all this stuff, and it definitely
Yeah.
challenges us to think about various things, but I don't know that it takes as simple a line as what you were saying. Right? Like I think what you were
Yeah.
saying is interesting and that's there, but there's more nuance to it. There's more complexity or what
That's
have
one
you.
Yeah, that's one of the unique things about the show is you can't sit down and pinpoint a theme or a message or a this is the point we wanted to get across with this show. It's incredibly diverse in sort of what it's trying to approach. It's incredibly diverse in terms of what it's trying to say. Sort of left to our own devices as to how we interpret all these different themes and messages that are brought up.
Yeah, right. And so with Kara, Whitney, it's like, are they friends? Whitney wants, from Whitney's perspective, she thinks Kara is her friend. From Kara's
Right.
perspective, Whitney's never her friend, and she knows Whitney's not her friend. And then Whitney wants to use Kara's art in the houses, and there's a whole thing about that. And then finally, Kara decides to sign on as a consultant and take some of this white woman's money, And there's
Yeah.
that whole question, I think, that she is grappling with of whether she's selling out, as it were, or whether she is managing to um, just take the benefit of this possibility and almost exploiting Whitney. Which direction does the exploitation go in? But then I think when you get that scene when they're at the party and Whitney kind of forces her on camera to praise
Mhm.
Whitney's quote unquote art or houses or whatever, you can just, man, that scene, and her face in that scene, and you can just sort of see everything in that moment of her realizing that she is the one that is being exploited in this
Yeah.
relationship, you know.
Yeah. 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 That was in a season of a lot of powerful and emotional scenes, and maybe one of the most because of how it made you confront their relationship and also Kara's understanding of do I quote unquote sell out for the sake of my art or the sake of my future, or the sake of what I want to do, just to try to please this woman that thinks we have something that we don't actually have. I thought that was one of the best scenes of the season.
Agreed. Yeah. And then the complication, though, again, it's messy,
Yeah.
always, because Kara, I don't think she's in the show again after that, actually, but she's mentioned, and Whitney's upset because Kara has quit art. She's quit being an artist,
Hmm.
but now she's got this profile. I think it was in the New York Times. It was something like that. Whitney's upset
Yeah.
about how she's getting all this attention for quitting art and so on. Well,
Yeah.
so but she is getting all of that attention, right? So if you could understand Kara saying, well, I'm going to take a step back from all of this because of those worries about exploitation and so on and so forth, or selling out, or I feel like I have sold out. But then she's being featured in a profile and so on. She hasn't gotten out of that whole
Yeah.
kind of nexus of a certain kind of fame or what have you that Whitney's jealous of. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I think, a key point. All of yeah, that she's getting a profile for something that she quit doing,
yeah.
for something that, yeah, when Whitney was trying desperately to get involved in what she was doing, now she's getting the notoriety, the fame that Whitney wants because she quit doing it.
Yeah. And
Uh,
Whitney's upset.
Quite the irony. I mean, and very interesting.
Yeah, and Whitney's upset too because their show is only on HGTV plus streaming or whatever. And
Exactly. Yeah.
but we need to talk about the ending more.
Yeah, we should.
It's
We
interesting to me
definitely
that
should.
we've kind of held off as long as we have, and how I feel like there was a lot of stuff going on with regard to everything we've been talking about that could have just continued,
Yeah.
but that's not what we get. Instead, we get one morning, Whitney wakes up, Nasher's on the ceiling.
Yeah.
Now, apparently, we were talking about them filming before, and I did want to mention this. I was reading that they filmed all of that, right? They're like, I don't know exactly how they did it. This is all
Yeah.
practical.
Yeah.
Um,
No CG. Yeah.
they've got like an upside down set or whatever, Nathan Fielder,
Yeah.
and really set themselves a challenge also because they're like, oh, you know what? Too, we're gonna have long shots.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they had to do a lot of planning and like make sure things are in the right places and all of that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Let's talk about it more thematically. How did this ending strike you, Ryan?
Yeah. And I think it's also important to set the context of we see the ending after there has been a show that's been created. They're disappointed it's on HGTV streaming. But there's a show that's been created. It's called Green Queen,
No
which is
longer
not,
philanthropy.
yeah, not originally what they wanted. So it focuses more on Whitney and her, sometimes doofus husband who, we just sort of, she can talk about how incompetent he is. They also are pregnant, which leads to a whole, another discussion about some things that are brought up earlier in the show about their sexual life. So all those things seem to have been resolved, at least in terms of the things they wanted, the things that they were hoping for. And then we get this just wild off the wall, I mean, literally off the, after bouncing off the wall ending where it seems like, okay, things seem to have normalized or we've gotten what we want. And then this, whether it's a curse, whether it's it's just, you can't have the things that you want to have, that type of message. We get this wild ending with Asher floating in the room and eventually up into space.
Yeah. Well, we almost do have to talk about their relationship more than we have, I guess,
Yeah.
to grapple with the ending, because we didn't really so far get into all of that in terms of at one point, Whitney and Dougie are kind of making a version of it that's very anti-Asher, and Whitney's thinking about leaving Asher in real
Yeah.
life,
Right.
but of course that'd be a problem for their ongoing show. So, to what extent does she decide to stay with Asher for the sake of being able to continue to do the show?
Right.
You have that scene where she makes him watch the footage, or he insists on seeing the footage, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, and Nathan Fielder's character, Asher, in that scene, which is in the penultimate episode, I think, at the
Yeah.
end. I think
Yes, I
that's
believe that's
right.
right. Yeah.
But he is saying, "Oh, I know I messed up or whatever." Like he's saying, "I'll be whatever you want me to be," or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I found that scene to be a difficult watch, and like really got thinking about emotional manipulation and structures like that. But I think that feeds into the ending in a certain way because
Yeah, that happened, and then they sort of got what they wanted in a way, or at least Whitney got what she wanted in a way. After that, just incredibly, again, like as you said, manipulating and emotionally devastating sort of not resolution that they come to, but confrontation that they have. But that leads to this, we think that we're safe, we think that we're where we want to be. Not now things are literally out of this world.
yeah. So I mean, to what extent is it something like Asher insubordinating himself to Whitney? Um, how much of that is at play? I guess I still don't have a definitive line on this. When I wrote on it at the time, I think I did a pretty good job. I don't know if people can read my article and tell me what they think, but I felt a step short of the kind of interpretation I wanted to be able to get out of myself. And I still, I guess, am feeling that to some degree. But thematically, I feel like it weirdly works
Yeah,
that
yeah,
this weird thing happens in this context where you have that backstory of the relationship. He's really subordinated himself to her. She's pregnant. We talked earlier about them being kind of detached from reality or what have you. And in a way, it's almost made literal, right?
yeah,
He's no longer grounded, literally, right?
yeah.
Um,
So many ways you can take that. I mean, I read it maybe too simply as, there's clearly the parallel of this happening to Asher as Whitney is giving birth to their son. And Asher can simply, maybe because he was cursed, maybe because of who he has been or who he and Whitney have been and what they have done, simply cannot have these things that would make them happy, would make them successful, would make them feel like that they have accomplished what they want to accomplish. So he is going to become detached from those things as, Whitney, who sort of became the dominant force, the one that he was, as you said, self-subordinate to, or subordinate to, she becomes the one who is able to have them. Asher is not, for a variety of reasons. Again, because of a curse, because of behavior, because of actions, because of limitations. He just, I've tried to sort of square the circle of the ending and what it actually means. There's so many different directions you can go, but he is being replaced by the newer version of himself as Whitney has the baby, and cannot simply stay in a place that has that much goodness or happiness. He's not letting himself be that person, and that's what happened in the episode before.
Interesting. Yeah. So to some degree, it's that he's becoming irrelevant
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
story, to the situation, to the
yeah.
setup of the Green Queen.
He became
Right. Oh, we've
irrelevant
already
to
switched
he
with the
became irrelevant
title
to the
change.
show. Yeah, he became irrelevant to their relationship after they got pregnant. He became, irrelevant. Dougie took more of a control of what it was and what it was to become than Asher ever did. When Asher thought he was the one in control, could make himself self-important by giving Abshir the property, by doing all these things. None of that seems to matter. And giving him the property, he gave him all the problems, right? It's just sort of he can't make himself relevant no matter how hard he tries.
Yeah. And that scene too was striking. I mean, there's so much stuff that we're just not going to have time to talk about.
Yeah.
But that Asher gives Abshir the property, and Abshir's like, "Whoa, what about the taxes and all this stuff?" And
Yeah.
he's like, "What's it?" He does, and there's this moment where you can tell that Asher and Whitney do not feel like Abshir has been sufficiently grateful,
Right.
but then it goes unexpressed. It's just going to be swallowed, maybe by Asher in particular, as something
Yeah.
that he's not going to express um, that real sentiment. Does he ever have the time to go and file that paperwork he says he's going to do? Does he do that? Would be a question, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um, Oddly, we haven't even really talked about the name of the show. In your
Yeah.
summary, you mentioned how Abshir's daughter cursed him. Apparently, that stemmed from a real life story when Nathan Fielder moved to the States, and some woman on the streets of LA asked him for money, and he said he didn't have any, and she said, "I curse you." And it stuck in his mind.
Yeah.
And so he ended up going to an ATM and going back and giving her some money.
I do love just that we were spent the rest of that show for psychoanalyzing. Is it is this curse real, or is it in his mind and he's then in turn making it real? I mean, I just thought that was a way to line up some of the things that were happening that was able to be consistent through, I guess, even the last 9 episodes.
Yeah. And I mean, I think overall, there aren't really indications. Well, I guess there are some indications that it was real, right? Because her
Yeah.
curse was for no chicken in his spaghetti, and God dang it.
All right.
Anyway, her chicken was missing. But there's a second curse. Dougie curses him. And I don't know. I don't know if we should be reading into that. Dougie's a fascinating character in various ways with Penny Safdie's character, right? Lots of stuff we probably just won't make the time to talk about here. But in that final scene, Dougie arrives. Dougie thinks Asher's just like climbed a tree because he's afraid
Yeah.
um, of becoming a father and things like that. The fire department shows up. No one will believe Asher.
Right.
And, as you mentioned, he ends up because they like set up stuff on the ground for when
Yes.
he'll fall. But when they like cut the tree branch up into outer space, and then Dougie just like breaks down crying on sitting on the pavement. Any thoughts on that?
I wonder about why they included that, particularly because they included it right next to the very, very ending, which is sort of bystanders saying, "Oh, look at that! Must have been a publicity stunt or something they just did for TV or whatever." And so it's like, is Dougie finally realizing that his his mission of doing everything to make the perfect the perfect show is, took it too far? Is he, I didn't quite understand why that, other than either there's really the sympathetic emotional part of I lost my friend, or I've lost the thing that makes me that makes me money. I think it's the former. But sort of why why they would go that specific direction paired with what the people say at the end. I'm not quite sure how to read on what that was supposed to be.
Yeah. I mean, I have some thoughts on it. I guess first thing I want to point out is it's clear they thought this was really important. Because I also read some stuff about this. Apparently, um, Nathan Fielder, who was directing the episode, just gave Penny Safdie all the time he needed.
Yeah,
Just like, let me know when you're ready to do it. You
yeah,
know, 20 minutes pass, half hour, and when it was okay, now we're ready to do the shot. You're really breaking down crying. And it is emotionally powerful.
yeah,
Why is he crying? You know, to some extent, I think it's because he didn't believe Asher,
yeah,
but now he's seen him float up into space. I do wonder if he's thinking to himself about that night in the car when he said, I curse you after Asher got out of the car.
yeah.
How superstitious is Dougie here? I don't know. I guess I did read it as more having to do with their relationship, pseudo friendship.
Yeah. I think as he's finally evolved into realizing that's what they have and feeling that emotion, in the end, the outside world, which is what he always wanted to appeal to, still sees it as, oh, cool thing they did for TV.
Right. So the yeah, the neighbors or whatever. Now apparently the possibility of a season two is not off the table.
I was going to say, I would have two things to say to you. Yeah, Safdie has said specifically it's not off the table. Fielder has said there definitely could be another season. So, do you think there should be? Do you think there will be? What's your thoughts there?
I mean, I think it'd be really interesting, and I would definitely watch it.
Yeah.
What I saw where Penny Safdie was saying something about not being off the table was also that the kind of inaugural idea for it would have to do with what exactly did happen to Asher and how
Mhm.
you interpret it. But I don't know. I'd be hesitant to put too much weight on that because of something we said along the way here, which is from a certain point of view, you could almost read it as Asher becomes irrelevant
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
show, to the Green Queen, and then maybe also to the curse. So they could well make, because that was the first thing I thought when I watched the finale, is I thought, oh well, I don't know if there's going to be more of the show because I mean clearly Nathan Fielder can't be in it anymore,
Right.
but maybe they could do it without Nathan Fielder. I
Yeah.
mean, in front of the camera, he'd probably still be behind the camera.
How Dougie and Whitney go forward with Green Queen because they could do that with or without Asher anyways, something like that.
Right, because it's no longer this couple. It's
Yeah.
centered on her as the Green Queen. Um, Maybe playing with that background, quote unquote tragedy or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever happened to Asher, but now it's Whitney and her um, kid. She looks weirdly happy in the final shot.
Yeah. Now remind me, does she know what happened to Asher?
No,
She
not
doesn't.
yet.
Yeah.
But here's what she does. Well, I mean, so he had ended up in the tree when
Hmm.
she goes to the hospital, right?
Yeah.
So to my memory, she doesn't know that he's like flown up into outer
Right.
space and died.
Right.
Um, but that whole scene's funny too because he keeps saying, "I'll be right behind you." It's like they're gonna figure this out soon somehow.
Yeah.
But she's just seemed really unconcerned
Yeah.
throughout, of the fact that he hasn't shown up at the hospital. She just doesn't seem particularly concerned about what has happened with Asher, who last I knew was, hanging on to a tree branch or what have you. And I think right before that last shot, the nurse asks her um, something like, do you want me to see if your husband's here? And she says, yeah, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But again, she doesn't seem very concerned about any of it. And
She, as she did the whole season, was probably still assuming there's some rational, logical, we can figure this out way to explain what was happening to them, and they'll just, they'll get through it. Whatever they want to do will end up working out. And I think that's kind of a theme of what they thought through this entire first season.
Yeah, or she doesn't really care. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe he has
Or
them,
she
but
doesn't care
they're
about it.
irrelevant. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll be very curious to see if they do make more of this
Yeah.
series and what they would do with it. Again, presumably, I can't put anything past them.
No.
It seems like Asher could not be in season two, but hey, you could just put him in there again, whatever,
Yeah.
and but they probably won't. I think they take seriously this event that happens to Asher and then play with it. And certainly, I think,
So just 2 months ago, Fielder told Hollywood Reporter, from the start, we had it mapped out beyond the first season. So,
there you go.
yeah.
It's going to happen.
This,
I mean, I think this has been pretty acclaimed.
yeah, absolutely it was. I mean, talk about being a part of the cultural conversation. I mean, this show was it, despite the fact of being on what the seventh most popular streamer out there. I don't know, but I mean, it's just was there
Yeah.
was a lot of signal around the show.
It's already been nominated for some awards. I think it will be nominated for more and not win anything.
Yeah, that's probably right.
I think that's the fate of the shows. It'll be on all the nomination lists and probably not win on anything because it's always up against the Bear or
Yeah.
whatever. Although it should be in the comedy category. That's the curse should be in the comedy category.
So I had that in my notes to ask you. The Curse was nominated for Golden Globe, Spirit Award, Writers Guild of America Award, all in drama.
Yeah.
Should it have been in another category, which it would go up against The Bear, which is
Yeah.
also and lose. So I mean, it's not like it matters, but
Right. You're right. It's not losing to the Bear because the Bear they've got in comedy and the Curse they've got in drama. So the Curse
right.
instead loses to Succession or Shogun or however these
Yeah.
things work out exactly
Yeah.
in terms of the timing. I do think, I mean, genre is always tough to talk about and pin down, and I think that's part of the problem. The best shows probably are the ones where it's the fuzziest about what genre to put them in many, many instances at least. Um,
Yeah. I'm
but
hoping in a couple weeks' time, you may have seen this. I didn't put it on purpose. There was a Variety piece that came out this week saying the Bear addresses issues like suicide, emotional maturity, crisis, all these different things. Is it actually a comedy, or why is it in comedy? It got a lot of publicity
yeah,
and a lot of people talking about it because of this whole debate. Hopefully in a couple weeks we can talk about that piece and sort of our thoughts on that. But there is sort of this thing of, as these new pieces of TV content are being created, how are we going to choose to define them in these boxes that they touch so many points? They don't fit cleanly in these things anymore, which is part of what makes them so good.
yeah. I mean, I think you can ask though, like, what is the prevailing spirit?
Mhm.
Where's the point land or something like that? This is what I would do at least. And with that
Yeah,
question in my own mind, I would say, okay, well, the point of the curse is that it's funny. Like the
yeah,
point of the show is primarily in comedy. Where I do think with the Bear, it's in drama. There are
yeah,
funny moments in the Bear, but I think that the prevailing spirit is um, more dramatic, more emotionally
yeah,
serious. Barry, the point's to be funny, right?
yeah.
Even if it's very dark. So it's like, I don't know. I have my way of thinking about these things. I do feel like when it comes to award categories, that they're often just like, oh, half hour comedy, hour drama. You know,
Exactly,
I
exactly.
don't know that that's always fair, but
To that
so it
point,
goes.
The Bear, The Curse, three of the best shows the past 2 years. So, you know, can't
Yeah.
can't can't put those shows in a box, my friend.
I should note there though too, Ryan, and I know we've griped about this multiple times, but it is actually my understanding because things like the Emmys are so weird in various ways that you submit in a category. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
it's
true.
it's probably um I think this is how it works. So it's not that, the awards association is saying the Bear is a comedy.
Yeah,
It's that FX submitted it as a comedy. So
they had to pick
put the
one of those
blame on the
guys.
right people, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. But it still goes back to the fact that those categories exist. That goes
Yeah.
back to the works. So anyway, we can talk in circles about that.
And
And
how much
probably
politicking do they do? I saw someone who was saying something about this, like about oh man, I can't remember all the details, but he was playing with this as well. I'm like,
yeah,
I think it was on Blue Sky on social media where he was saying, this will be submitted in that category, so it doesn't have to go up against that.
yeah.
And Fargo, it will be submitted, whatever. I'm just rambling. I don't even remember the details of it. Um,
Well, I'm very glad to revisit this show. This was a good conversation, and I'm glad we finally got to talk about it at length, which is something we didn't get to do on the podcast when it was first going.
Yeah, me too. Enjoy talking about it with
Yeah.
you. There's so much here that we still weren't able to get into, but fans of the curse, you can go and read my articles on TV Obsessive. I wrote on it week to week as it was airing. This is one of those.
All
There's a
very good,
handful
though.
of
All
shows
very good.
where I always find myself thinking I should return to this with like a more comprehensive essay or
Mm,
something. And do I find the time to do that?
yeah.
Rarely. I did it with Severance, so it's hard to find time. Um, Anyhow, thanks for listening. Next week, we're going with Ryan's choice. You
Yeah.
want to tell people what you've chosen?
So next week we're going to talk about the first season of Three Body Problem, which I'm going to say you should not watch. We should have a
You
conversation with you not watching it. I may pick one episode or so to try to get you some context for some things, but I'd love to have a conversation on some of the themes and things they touch on, and how grand they try to be with this show without you having the context of having seen it. Watch it if you want, but just either way, it's gonna be an interesting conversation.
Now I'm really waffling. I saw that you chose the show, and I thought, well, I haven't made time to watch this show yet, but I could probably do it within the next week. It's just binge one season of a show, but now you're telling me not to watch it. We'll see how it goes, everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
Tune in next week to find out whether I watched the show before we talk about it.
Yeah, if you've not watched it yet, it's one season, Three Body Problem on Netflix.
Either way, we'll get into spoiler territory,
Either
whether
way,
I've seen it,
yeah.
right? So
You read all my stuff, so you know
yeah,
everything.
yeah, right. So people listening, yeah, next week we'll talk about Three Body Problem with our usual news and notes up front, and then after next week, I think we're gonna start talking about the Bear for a couple weeks. So thanks for listening. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast, please do leave a good rating, review, or if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the thumbs up button, all that good stuff. Check out TVObsessive.com. Follow us on social media, search for TV Obsessive, and you should find us on whatever platform you're using, unless it's something really weird. There's so many social media platforms now. Anyway, we're on X, we're on Facebook, we're on Blue Sky, we're on Threads, we're on Instagram. And yeah, that's about it. So we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks for the conversation. See you then.